Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The City Gone Wild. Now, this is an episode of Lost Film File, where I talk about everything I can find on a lost film. And today I'm talking about a lost film of Louise Brooks. This is her fifth completely lost film, and I'm sure most of you who are watching this through searches and whatnot are watching it to find information about a lost Louise Brooks film, but really this film was almost not lost. They actually did find it, but unfortunately it became lost inadvertently because of it being found, believe it or not. Now, film preservationist David Shepard, who's pretty much the reason why any film that isn't ever going to be featured on this list has become available from the silent era. He spent his entire life really preserving film, and he's the reason why we have so many of the films of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and so many others, because of his tireless efforts and work. And he went to Paramount Pictures to ask about this film specifically. I think he was going for AFI, or the American Film Institute, to find any films that were considered lost or very unavailable and kind of retrieve them and take care of them. And so he called and asked for The City Gone Wild, and they called to the department who was storing all their prints and said, could you please get it down for him so then he can go pick it up. Now, the story diverges a little because there's like several different versions online, but the one that I'm going to stick with is basically that when they went to get it, they saw there was dust on it, meaning it was decomposing, and this was nitrate film, which is something that sounds very, very flammable. I mean, anything that says nitrate in it doesn't sound like not flammable. So they decided, before just giving him the film, they decided to just dunk it in water, as was procedure to do with any film that had kind of white dust around it, as they believed it was more combustible, and they didn't want a great fire to take out the rest of their film prints, or the rest of the studio or something like that. So they dunked it in water, and he called them and found out about this and said, could I come and save it from that dunked water? And they said sure, and they still destroyed it and threw it out. It's kind of not David Shepard's fault, really. It was just kind of inadvertent. I'm sure it sort of haunts him as someone who saved so many silent films that, his actions inadvertently sort of led to this film being forever lost. Although, it could be found at some point, but it is kind of a sad story. I've never heard of a film trying to be found and then inadvertently lost before, which is kind of how I came to find out about this film, which I thought was interesting. This film is probably most famous and most noteworthy because it co-starred Louise Brooks. That's right. Even on Wikipedia, when it says starring, it just lists her, because the other stars, Thomas Meehan, I think, and Moretta Milner, have not really stood the test of time the way Louise Brooks has. And the few reviews I could find of this film of the era don't even actually mention her. The Louise Brooks Society has quotes from reviews, which I can find online, but I'm not trying to disprove them or call them fake news or something. I'm just saying I could not find them, but I'm sure they have the documentation to back that up. Those reviews bring up her by name and say she's the best thing in it. Sure. I think a lot of what made this film fascinating is her. Now, this was made before Louise Brooks went to Europe and made Pandora's Box and kind of made all those other stuff. This was during her Hollywood years when she was doing supporting roles that kind of got her notice. So theoretically, yes, that probably could have happened, but based on certain reviews I read, I sort of feel like a lot of this is people. I mean, we can't see this movie, so I can't really make too much of an argument, but I sort of feel like it's people who have posthumously, who really love her, have kind of built this performance up. And I wish David Shepard had found it. Obviously, Louise Brooks became a lot bigger through repertory screenings starting in the 50s, and whether the incident that happened with him seems to vary between the 60s and the 70s, depending on which version of the story I read. It's sort of interesting that this film has become bigger. I guess if, it's kind of like one of those DVDs where you buy it and a star's face is like really big in it because they know that's the only way they can sell it. And I guess that's the only way people would still sort of care about this movie to a certain degree. It's directed by a director I don't really know. It was also actually written by Herman J. Mankiewicz, who would go on to write Citizen Kane, believe it or not. So maybe that helps a little bit, but he's third billed, so who knows how much involvement he even had. But he did help write this film, believe it or not, with Jules Furthman and Charles Furthman, who wrote the story and the scenario, and it just has him listed. I don't know how much involved. It doesn't sound like he had too much involvement, but he is listed, so he did help. It's kind of made similar to a earlier successful gangster film, Underworld, another silent gangster film, Underworld, and this was put into production quickly after that, having the same producer, writer, and I believe cinematographer of that and one of the actors. This feels like it's kind of in that wheelhouse, and I understand it. She was supposed to be in Public Enemy from William Wellman, who offered her the role that went to Jean Harlow, and she turned that down. So it would be interesting to see her in a gangster film like this. She does have the notorious distinction of being a character called Snuggles Joy. The only thing people seem to agree on the plot is that the main guy, who's played by Thomas Megan, is investigating this underworld thing, and there's some that say he's getting married to this woman and then he finds out her father is behind everything, but there's others that he sort of falls in love with Louise Brooks and that she is a mole for the gang and stuff, even though she's always going out with Gunnar Gallagher, who's played by Fred Kohler. That seems to not be so disputed, but whether she's having a relationship with the main guy or not, or how important she is to the plot, depends on what various plot description you read. But who can really disagree, because no one can see the damn thing. I do like that her character's name is Snuggles Joy. Someone needs to use that for something, since clearly this movie itself actually can't, even though it did. Sort of. This is the most recent film of hers that is lost, from November 1927. Not obviously that recent, but it's the later film of hers that is completely lost. And I think that's a shame, because this seems like it could maybe be something. I don't really know, frankly, but one thing that I think will give people a little hope is the film she made before this, or at least was released before this. I don't know, production order of films from 1927, believe it or not, is a film called Now We're in the Air, which actually recently screened in June of this year, which is 2017 when I shot this video. They actually found 23 minutes of footage from Now We're in the Air, and they played it at the San Francisco Silent Film Festival at the Castro Theater, which is actually really cool. That for a while you think a lot of these films are lost, and often they're discovered. And I think this would be a cool one to discover, since there's such a disparity, so be able to kind of set the record straight a little bit. It's also, kind of towards the end of her time in Hollywood, really, and it's her last film released in 1927. She would, of course, do 3 more Hollywood films before she went off to do Pandora's Box, one of them being Beggars of Life, which I've already reviewed and was recently re-released. I don't think it's probably the Louise Brooks that most people love, which is probably, mainly Pandora's Box and the European stuff and Beggars of Life, but I think it gives you a clue of the Hollywood stuff that was going on with her before she had kind of the better roles that she is more known for. And maybe it shows, I'm not sure, the kind of roles that eventually got her cast in Pandora's Box, which were these kind of more supporting roles. And maybe it shows why the public was so into her, or maybe it doesn't. We don't really know, but I hope one day we do know. And if we do know, I would really like to be wrong about this film from 1927 and be told that most of what I said was stupid when we actually find this film, much like how they found Now We're in the Air. I hope that one day happens for The City Gone Wild, but until then, I guess this is all we know about this silent gangster picture, which may or may not have a very interesting performance of Louise Brooks as Snuggles Joy. I would like to give a special thanks and a shout out to Matt Berry, who helped me do some research and talk this video out with me before I shot it. So a special thanks to him. Go to his channel and subscribe. I've already subscribed, obviously, but Matt's a good friend and you should definitely check out his stuff. He has lots of classic movie stuff as well as short films and a lot of good documentaries as well. You should subscribe already because he posts a lot of good stuff on there. And he's a big help to this channel and a very good friend of mine. So if you would like to talk about The City Gone Wild, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.